Hello, everyone. I have with me here today Aric from Sweet Relief Musicians Fund. How are you, Aric?
Hi, I'm good, Christy. Thank you for having me.
I'm very happy to have you here and to shed light on the important work that your organization does. So, let's talk a little bit more about Sweet Relief Musicians Fund. The Sweet Relief Musicians Fund provides financial assistance to all types of career musicians and music industry workers who are struggling to make ends meet while facing physical or mental health issues, disability, or age related problems. Can you tell us more about how this organization came to be?
Absolutely. So the story of our origin it starts with Victoria Williams, who was and still is a very talented singer-songwriter, much beloved by the music community. And she was going out on tour with Neil Young in the early '90s, and she began suffering some symptoms of what turned out to be MS. So she, during her recovery process or her treatment process, never really recover all the way from that. Um, Found herself overwhelmed by medical bills pretty quickly, and she luckily had some pretty highfalutin friends in the music industry, and they gathered together and put together a benefit album for her, which did very, very well. It had some incredible folks on there. It was Soul Asylum and Lucinda Williams and Pearl Jam and the Water Boys, and just the list goes on and on about these folks who came together to cover her songs on the album. So the album sold really well, enough to cover her bills and then some. So Vic, being the generous spirit that she is, put some money aside to start Sweet Relief Musicians Fund. So the album came out in '93. So it's actually the 30th anniversary of the album this year. There have been
Wow.
a few albums since then, but that's the one we're sort of most known for. So that's titled Sweet Relief, a benefit for Victoria Williams. So she started the charity in '94, and we've sort of gone strong ever since, with the mission to not let musicians get buried by medical bills.
That is such an incredible story and just so beautiful that she turned it into something that has gone on for this long and supported this many musicians in the process, all from her own personal experience. I love that story. So, your organization champions for the idea that music makes our lives and the events in our lives special and memorable. However, the choice a musician makes to be a professional musician is one of sacrifice. Can you tell us more about the common hurdles for musicians as they pursue this type of career?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It's music is so important. It's kind of the universal language. Every culture has music, and if you've ever tried to watch a movie without the music, it's a whole different experience, right? It really moves us in a way that I don't know anything else does. But yeah, it's definitely a risky roll the dice kind of a move, as any parent will tell you when their kid comes and says, "Dad, I want to be a musician." That's not necessarily what you want to hear. Some, of course, go on to find fame and fortune, but that is the minuscule few. And the other sort of interesting dynamic here is that you can kind of, if you've got some talent and you're willing to put in the work, and that's not these days, that's not just, being able to play guitar. You've got to be able to run your socials, you've got to cultivate your audience, you've got to communicate with your audience and get in touch with them and break through more noise than ever. But you have the tools to do that these days, which so it's a real juggling act. But anyway, you typically aren't getting any health insurance or 401ks or any of the perks of working for an employer. You're self-employed. You're on your own to create your art, get your art into the hands of those who you hope want to hear it. And then you might be able to go from club to club, traveling around and earning a buck, but you're still living from paycheck to paycheck. That's, as at the beginning, you might have to pay to play. There's all kinds of stuff you have to go through. But if you even get to the point where you can play clubs, that's still, you can grind that out for a long time, going from club to club and check to check. But when something happens, if you're even as simple as like you break a finger, and you're like a guitarist, if you can't play for a month, 2, 3 months, that's lost income that you can't make that up. You've got nothing in the bank. You then have the bill from whatever the urgent care is, or the emergency, whatever that hospital bill is, and any ongoing prescriptions and all that stuff begins to pile up. And all of a sudden, there's a reason why bankruptcies, the number one cause of bankruptcies in this country, are medical debt. And when you're an already vulnerable population, like the majority of professional musicians are, it hits especially hard, and it's especially frightening. So I always say it's terrible that we have to exist as an organization to provide this safety net, but we do, and I'm very glad we do, because just as we're film or taping this podcast, Christy, I'll get a couple of applications into my inbox of people who need help.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's so important to highlight this exact need, because as you just explained, it really takes your passion to drive you forward through these obstacles when you decide to be a musician. Like, you have to really like what you're doing, right? And you've got to really enjoy, and most musicians do, and that's why they've chosen that path, because it's a deeply fulfilling career. But to your point, it's a shame that there isn't, that type of support for an industry that we all benefit from too, just by
Yeah.
being listeners and consumers of the music industry. So, since the mid 60s, the number of individuals choosing music as a career has grown exponentially. Previous to that time, most professionals were either orchestra or classical players or jazz and blues artists. But how have things changed with the explosion of pop, rock, and country career musicians?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't consider myself a musical historian. I know that is on our website, and that was added by our former executive director, Rob Max, who uh, he would talk about this and pinpoint that the moment when the Beatles came over, and every kid in the United States wanted to pick up a guitar and be John Lennon or Paul McCartney, and that changed the landscape and like flooded the the country with wannabe musicians. They all wanted to be like the Beatles, and so that changed the landscape a bit, and there were sort of a lot more people wanting to do this. And to your point earlier, yes, it's driven completely by a passion to do it. It can be very unrewarding and really painful and cruel. It can also be amazingly rewarding in other ways too. There's a kind of a famous, I don't know if it's famous, but I heard that, and I'll paraphrase it. Sorry, Mac, but Mac Reynolds, who is Dan Reynolds' brother and manager, Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons, uh, apparently he tried to talk his brother out of becoming a musician, um, and finally came to the conclusion, like, he tells other musicians, don't do this unless you have to, unless you have to inside, like, you have to do it. And that was what Dan said to Mac, that I have to do this. And that's just the way it is with some artists. And thank goodness for it, but it's also a little scary because of the way we treat our musicians and artists in this country.
Yeah, and it's
It's
such a
not
risk
easy.
you're taking, like such a huge
Such a
risk you're
risk.
taking for your art. And
Yep.
in that way, I have an immense amount of respect for musicians. And it really, even more so for the musicians that are doing that grind and have never and may never reach some sort of stability financially. But they do it because they really feel like they have to, they're called to, that is what makes them tick. I
Yeah.
don't know. I have a
They're
ton of
real
respect for that.
entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
They put it all on the line.
for
They
sure.
walk out into the wilderness, as Bob Lefsetz says, and I admire them too.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's fantastic that you and your organization exists, to help support people being able to not be defeated by, anything that comes their way negatively. And in that way, you're holding them up through their tough times, and then hopefully so that they can continue to do what their passion is. And just speaking to that, like through tough times and how you guys help, during the pandemic, the music industry was hit particularly hard, with live music being shut down nationwide, from big venues to small venues and everything in between. So, in what ways was Sweet Relief able to help support musicians during that time period?
Well, we were able to really exponentially multiply our grant making due to support from some folks who saw the need and may not have been aware of the kind of this. We see that this need is always there, but it was really brought into sharp focus, as you say, by the pandemic. So and through the through the lens of measuring our success by the amount of people we helped, we were incredibly successful during the pandemic years. Again, it's sort of bittersweet that we have to measure success by the unfortunate circumstances of others, but we really were able to do more than we ever have. We gave away more funds than we have in, like, I think in the last many years combined. um, so we don't only help musicians. A few years ago, before the pandemic, we opened up the fund to include what we call music industry professionals, which includes all the backline workers, the road crew, the guys in black, as they're called, who set everything up. The lighting guys, the board guys, the mixers, production managers, all those folks who are responsible for making the shows happen. So they were hit very, very hard by the pandemic. That suddenly their careers are, they just don't have a job anymore, and who knew it was going to last for years? But they're not doing live streams. They're not able to sell merch, so it's just gone. And this was a large pool of incredibly talented people with very specialized jobs who were completely devastated. And these are they earn a good income, so these are homeowners and successful people. Anyone though who's not going to work for a couple of years is going to be in big trouble financially. um, well, maybe not Beyonce, but the
Certain people, not
people.
so much.
Yeah. So we were really fortunate to be able to help a lot of crew and musicians and agents and managers and everybody. The entire industry came to a halt. So it was unprecedented. But we were really able to fulfill our mission in a way that we hadn't been able to before, on a really grand scale. So that felt terrific to be able to play our part, and do so on such a massive scale it felt good.
I'm sure that's powerful that you were able to your organization was able to pinpoint that need prior to the pandemic, and then what a significant situation that was for all the behind the scenes people who wouldn't have had that support if organizations like yours didn't band together to help with that. I think it's great that you pointed that out, because oftentimes we don't think about all the behind the scenes people. And just like you said, a musician could still keep doing live streams, which was awesome that people could pivot in that way. But yeah, what about the crew that's now completely out of a job? So I love that you guys were able to help with that. That's really pretty cool. So
Thank you.
can you tell us a little bit about the grant process? Like, how does that work, and what type of grant recipients are you working with specifically? Beyond what you just explained, what type of person qualifies usually for your grant, and how does that process work?
Sure. Yeah, we try to keep it as simple as possible. It's it's all on the website. The criteria are there, and we're not trying to make people jump through hoops to get the help that they need. Especially typically when someone is applying to us, they're sick or they're recovering from something. Sometimes they're going through cancer treatment, and filling out a long application is not really feasible. We'll even accept applications that you've submitted to other organizations for help, and we always come back to people. Everybody who reaches out is going to get help in some way. If it's not always a financial grant, we'll help give you a list of resources of other organizations that might be able to help you. Um, so the grant process is simple. You apply, vetted. If you qualify and the funds are available, we typically like to pay third parties directly. So that is, we'll pay the doctor bill directly for you, and other vital living expenses are also included. So it's not just doctors and prescriptions; it's also landlords. We'll send food cards and pay utilities. But we like to pay the third party directly. That gives our donors peace of mind that their funds are being used responsibly. So in the pandemic, it was a little bit different. We were just trying to get money into people's hands. people were like, literally starving. And so we were getting money out very, very quickly. But our normal operations are third parties directly and medical related expenses, but also vital living expenses.
That makes a lot of sense to do it that way. And I like the angle of the transparency with your donors, that matters. I think that's a great way to work it. And as I was looking on your website and I was really impressed by your community partners and all the other bands and musicians, like some that are super big names that are behind this and support your mission. So, can you tell us more about the community partners, your Add a Buck supporters, and just the crazy long list of huge supporters you have out there in the music industry?
Yeah, it's a long list. Everybody has been so great. The music community is definitely our biggest source of support. I think they're the ones who can empathize the most, right? They all started out somewhere. Every one of those musicians on the list was a new musician at one time, walking out into the wilderness, and so they know what it can be like, and so they're there to support us when we call upon them. And it's certainly grown over the years. A lot of that is due to we have a really robust auction program where we'll ask artists to donate, ticket and meet and greet packages, like I said earlier, signed guitars and experiences, and we put a lot of money in the kitty that way. And our corporate partners also, a lot of that, maybe not a lot, but some of the bigger ones came in during the pandemic, where, like I was saying, we had this system in place already, and they saw the need, and they said, "Wow, how do we help musicians? Here's an organization that gets money into the hands of musicians. Let's go." So we were introduced to a lot of larger partners there, but some of them were already there, like some of those big boys, like Live Nation and AEG, who have been supportive. I've been with the charity for I think 12 years, and it's just been a matter of kind of building those up. A lot of people, we're lucky we've been around for 30 years. So when I call, I get a lot of like, "Oh, I remember that album in the 90s. I'm so glad you guys are still around." And I'm just having to reintroduce. So it's not really a cold call, right?
That's
So
awesome.
that's a real luxury to have as a fundraiser. Uh, so yeah, and so my job is basically to kind of decide what to ask for, really, and structure it in a way that they're not going to laugh me off the phone, but also I don't want to leave anything on the table. So it's a bit of a tightrope walk sometimes, and I've learned a lot over the years, and it's fun. It's fun, but I'm proud of both of those lists that you mentioned.
Yeah. I think that it's your work speaks for itself. So I would imagine it's not too much of a hard sell to explain that this is worth getting behind. And I would encourage my listeners to go check. Well, we're going to encourage you to check out the website regardless, but I would encourage you to go check out the website and just see this list of all of the artists too that you have support. Like I said, some big names and some of your favorite artists might be listed there. And I think that that's really powerful too in terms of, um, you know, just being able to really show people the power of what you're doing and who's behind it. It's really pretty cool. So, as you mentioned earlier, you're not only addressing the physical challenges that cause financial setbacks for musicians, but you also address the mental health challenges. I really wanted to make sure that we hit on that. Can you tell us more about the mental health focus of your efforts?
Sure. Yes, we're really lucky to have a partnership with a terrific organization called Backline, and they formed a few years back, seeing this need in our industry to uh, help folks understand that mental health can be just as important as physical health. And we added that into our mission statement. It was just physical disabilities. We added the mental health piece in there. When it comes into sharper focus when you lose somebody like Chris Cornell or any of the incredible musicians that we've lost over the past several years. And we wonder if that could have been averted had this stigma been removed and had the help been readily available and had people known where to go for help, that they could even get this kind of help. So we wanted to take some action and we weren't quite sure. how to do it right. We're not social workers. We're not, mental health professionals. So we partner with Backline, and they've got a great network of clinicians that anyone in the music industry can go and say, "Hey, I need help. I don't really know what to do." They'll manage your case, and then Sweet Relief will step in to cover uh, X amount of bills if the financial need is there. So we basically, our role is to remove the financial barrier to getting mental health care. We don't want anyone who can't afford it to not get the care that they need.
That's awesome. That's really, really cool because as we talked about earlier, just the all the obstacles that musicians face, I would imagine that mental health is a huge obstacle in many cases because, if you're in that grind and you're, just trying to stay afloat for the love and sake of your passion and all that. There's a heavy mental health burden there, or even if you are one of the biggest names in music, that's a different kind of mental health burden, but it's still a mental health burden. And I think it's incredible that you are, stepping in to say normalizing it, like no matter where you are in this spectrum as a musician, it's okay and it's normal to feel like you need some help or support in the mental health space and that you have that partner that's the professionals. I think that sounds like a really good partnership there.
Thank you. Well said. Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, you also have various ways for donors to support specific funds within your Sweet Relief umbrella. So, could you break that down for us and tell us more about the options available to donors?
Sure. Yeah. So we noticed many years ago that people, some people wanted to keep the funds in their own communities, and they wanted to help the artists that were close to them. So we started the regional funds that cover the whole country. And so, if you live in New Orleans, you can help New Orleans musicians. Some people, I really like jazz, and I want to help jazz musicians who might be in trouble. So we did that. So we have these different buckets that people can donate to, and then those funds are there if a jazz musician needs them, or if you know a Philadelphia musician gets in trouble. Christy McCaffrey knows that the funds that she donated are there to help them out. Um, it's funny when you were talking earlier about your listeners maybe wanting to get involved. I did something that I don't remember exactly where he saw it, but and this happened a few times. Somebody reached out and said, "Hey, I saw that who was this? The first one was like Joan Jett is one of your supporters, and I really am a big fan of her, and I would be willing to donate, $10,000 if she would sign a guitar for me." And so we did that, and this gentleman has since bought a dozen guitars in exactly that way. So I keep forgetting to mention
Wow,
this.
that's so
This is a
cool.
possibility. Yeah. So if your donors are fans of any particular band on our list and would like, to maybe Zoom with them or get a signed instrument, or if there's some dream scenario that they want to dream up, I'm always happy to approach and try to set something up in exchange for a donation. So want to
That
put
is
that out
such a
there.
cool idea and such a fantastic way to, just have a different funnel of funds. I love that
Yeah.
idea. That's so
Yeah.
such a win-win.
Yeah. I think so.
So, we'll also, like I said, we're gonna encourage everybody to really dive into the website. I think it's clear from my reaction that I think your website's pretty cool and gives you all sorts of insight into what you guys do and, just all the ways that you can support and get involved. Um, can you tell us more about the merchandise you have for sale, like on the website? I did think that was pretty cool because I think people oftentimes will be willing to just kind of like, grab some t-shirts or grab something cool to wear and know that it's going towards a good cause. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, thanks for the compliments about the website. Tatiana over here does an incredible job and works really hard to keep it
Kudos to
fresh. And
Tatiana.
yeah, Tati's the best. So she wears a lot of hats around here, as do we all, because we're a small team. So Caitlin takes care of our store, and she's constantly putting up new designs, and also has done an amazing job turning that into really something from nearly nothing. Um, and yeah, all the proceeds from our store go directly into the fund to help people. And there's all kinds of cool stuff. T-shirts. She's putting up like, I think there's a little, my wife actually made me buy one of the little wine glasses that were on there.
Nice.
And there's always stuff to check out. I mean, I think if you're following us on socials, we're putting up new designs and stuff all the time. And if I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun here, but so sweetrelief.org is the website, and you can check out other work from there. You can see it on our Facebook page, Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on TikTok. If any of your audience are TikToking,
Nice. That is
that's
exactly
another
what
one
I
of.
was just going to ask you next. So I'm glad
Oh,
you rolled
okay,
right
all
into
right,
it. So
yeah.
Instagram, TikTok, and the website. Are you on Facebook as well?
We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter,
Twitter.
and that's another hat that Tatiana wears. So you can shout her out if you want on any of our socials. And
Nice. I'll be
yeah,
sure to link all of those handles in the show notes
cool.
here. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here because A, that was really super informative, like insightful look into you know, what the reality is for musicians, especially when they're hit with a financial hardship or a health issue. It's just really cool to see all the ins and outs of how you're working, your organization is working to support that need. But also, just thanks for taking the time to inspire us with what you're doing because it really is motivating to hear stories like this and to hear all the good stuff that Sweet Relief Musicians Fund is doing.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to let people know. I appreciate the invitation.